morning. So yeah, I'm Leah. Thank you all for having me. Before I was at ECHO, I was a student at Covenant College, where I had the privilege of studying community development under many of the brilliant minds behind the Chalmers Center. And I heard many names, not least of which was the Tabitha Kapic, and got to hear a lot of stories and teaching, not directly from her, but through many of her coworkers. So I'm very excited to hear from her today. She was someone who me and many of the other students in my cohort were like, oh, maybe someday we can be like her. So y'all will love this. Tabitha calls herself not necessarily an expert, but an avid practitioner, when we would all probably call her an expert, of design thinking and methodology. She's used her many skills to train thousands of people in more than 32 countries in gospel-centered, asset-based innovation. A few highlights from her career are that she worked with the American Embassy in London. She led Medair US in Haiti during the 2010 earthquake. She has worked in strategic fundraising, planning, and design thinking processes with Covenant College, through her own consulting firm, and through Bridge Innovate. Currently, she serves at the Chalmers Center, where she and her coworkers support the church, the American church and the global church, in rethinking poverty and responding with biblical principles. So please join me in welcoming Tabitha Kapic.
Wow, that was lovely. I just like to be done now because I love that introduction. Good morning. I'm so excited to be with you. When ECHO contacted us months and months ago, it was kind of a dream come true because I know about ECHO because Covenant College sends down students to be interns. And it's this storied place in my mind, so I haven't been to the farm yet. Hopefully I can get there today. Really excited to be with you all. Okay, she did such a great job with the introduction. I don't have to tell you about Chalmers, but let me just dive in to innovation. So in 1969 was the first time that we got a human on the moon. Pretty innovative. In fact, it took probably thousands, a million little innovations for us to get there. But something that happened 3 years later is far more interesting to me. 3 years after we put humans on the moon, we thought, let's put wheels on a suitcase. Now, I mean, first just let that soak in. But also think about which one of those two things affects your life more. I mean, if you're a NASA nerd, you would tell me, oh, you have a microwave because of the space program, and you're right. But this idea that sometimes innovation is quite small is something I want to just lean into. So let me tell you my trick for how I know if innovation happened. What I am looking for, you probably have a different definition, which is great. What I'm looking for is a person experiencing, is someone experiencing relief, hope, delight? I am constantly, when we're experimenting and testing, I'm looking at the user, the participant, the person, to see, are they experiencing one of these emotions? And that tells me I'm on the right track. But there's another thing that I've grown to really value to tell me if innovation has happened. And that is, I can see a behavior change over time. There's a lot of great ideas out in the world. But I think for them to be truly innovative, you have to be able to track changes over. They gotta last. So just kind of setting you up for how I think about innovation, and we'll kind of circle back to that later. So in 1999, 25 years ago this year, the Chalmers Center was started. Dr. Brian Fickert with his freshly minted economics PhD from Yale University, showed up on Lookout Mountain and thought, what if I could take asset-based development and combine it with the Bible and God's big story and give it as a tool to the church? And so that's how the Chalmers Center started. And a big part of our beginning was establishing savings groups with some of the world's poorest people. And he did a lot of research on that. And then he wrote a book called When Helping Hurts. Can you just put your hand up if you've heard of it or read it? Oh, yeah. Okay, I could stop explaining. So that's great. Okay, so now we're at 1999. I show up on Lookout Mountain. My husband becomes a theology professor. And he has been teaching there since he was 28 years old and has never gone anywhere else. And we've raised our children there. But anyway, when I showed up from the American Embassy, Commerce Department, all bright-eyed, someone found me pretty quickly. And that black arrow is pointing to Dr. Brian Fickert, and the little white arrow on the shrub is pointing to me. So we were a little bit younger in 2002, and Brian recruited me to launch. I did a lot of events at the American Embassy in London. He recruited me to launch the first ever Christian Economic Development Institute, where Chalmers gathered. I mean, if anyone is in this picture, you have to tell me. I can identify now, we should have made a key at the time, like 5 people in here. So we launched that institute, and then I went on and I did some other things that were just mentioned, Liam just mentioned. Got a lot more experience under my belt. Now, fast forward to 2019. I am landing from Europe with my family, and I turn off airplane mode. And I have an email from Brian Fickert that also includes a plane ticket to West Africa. So in a few weeks, I found myself once again with Brian Fickert dragging me into something and taking over my life. If you've ever met him, you can see him in the back of this photo. He is 6'10", and he has a tendency to say, I have a wonderful plan for your life. So I bet many of you have heard that from him. So what Brian wanted me to do, he wanted me to take that God's story of change, asset-based development, and then just add in design thinking. I had been working in the for-profit space with design thinking, and we were working on like the future of transportation and talking about the last mile and autonomous vehicles. We were talking about the future of floor covering and using innovative methodologies to develop that. But design thinking in the poverty alleviation space, what would that look like? Could we do it? How are we going to do it? Etc. So my first job was figuring out, getting really clear on what we believed about all 3 of these components. All right, story time. So it's 2020, it's during the pandemic. My 2 children and my husband and I mean, they're now taller than me, all of them, but we wanted to go hiking just to get out of the house. So this is a real picture from the back of Lookout Mountain, and I took this picture. At the very back center of it is the entrance to a mine shaft, a cave. I had found this with a friend years and years before, and I had not taken the children. So we're going up, everyone's social distancing. We approach the mouth of the cave, and we see this family is coming out. And so we kind of like press against the rock wall and let them pass. But I noticed that the man was holding his hands like this. And I'm an animal lover. I see that dog over there. I know that dog is working. I'm not going to touch it. But if you ever have a chance that I could pet your dog when it's off duty, I would love to. I said, what do you have there? And he said, oh, this frog was freezing to death in that cave. We're putting it out here where it can be safe and warm. I didn't say anything, we just nodded, and out they came. So what do you think happened what do you think we found when we entered the cave? You guys sound like you know, so I just thought I'd ask. There were other frogs. There was a consistent temperature year-round. There was water coming down the cave walls, and there was plenty of food, cave crickets, other invertebrates. What these well-meaning people had done was they took something that was flourishing in an environment, and they took it and put it somewhere where they would feel like they were flourishing. That was a time when helping hurt. That frog. I have confidence in the frog. I think he hopped right back into the cave. Like, what are you guys doing? So I really want you to answer this question in your mind. Think of a time when you saw helping that hurt someone. It doesn't have to be in poverty alleviation, though. Extra credit, gold stars if it is. But just sort of think. There's some famous stories out there in the world of the West trying to alleviate poverty in other places, and we've done some pretty bad things. But I want you to kind of look to the person to your left, look to the person to your right. You're going to need to talk to them, okay? We can do that. What I want to do, I might struggle to get your attention back, but I want you to turn to the person next to you. Make sure you know their name and where they live most of the time. And ask them to tell you about a time when you saw helping hurt. You don't have to hit it out of the park, just the first thing that came into your mind. And then in 2 minutes, we'll switch. So please do just ask the person next to you their name, where they live, and a time when they've seen helping hurt. Can I have my water? Thank you, buddy.
Do you want it up there?
Yeah. Haven't switched yet. Consider switching so that both people get a chance. Okay, if you could wrap it up. You guys did great, thank you. So if you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. great audience. That was so good. You guys really delighted to talk to each other. So we just innovated during a plenary by letting us talk to each other. So I love it. I want to hear all those stories later. So just come tell me. Okay. So we know that helping sometimes hurts, but why? Why do we mess up sometimes? Well, let's look where we should look, and let's look at the Bible. Human beings are transformed into the image of the God they worship. That's what the Bible tells us. We just have a tendency to get transformed into the God we worship. And the nature of the God we worship shapes our culture. It shapes our story of change. What is the goal of life? And then how can we achieve this goal? So if you're an economist, like Leah, like my daughter, is actually an economics major at Covenant College, and she's with me. Yay, Margot. If you're an economist studying in the West, the goal of life is to accumulate things to make yourself happy and comfortable. And so you can see how in the West, our culture has transformed us into beings that do that, and it feels natural, right? Or you can think of some traditional religions and maybe ancestral worship, spirit worship, and how these affect the culture of people. So we have another problem past that. And first, there wasn't a problem. God made us good. He declared that we were good. And the way that God shaped us was that we are designed to have flourishing in 4 key relationships: self to God, self to self, self to others, and self to all of creation. And creation is not just I'm hiking in a nature preserve, and it's not just agriculture, but that is part of it. It's also the buildings we create. When people make paintings, creation is just kind of everything in the world. The fall happened. So if you think of this graphic like a bicycle wheel, the fall broke our relationship with God, warped the bicycle tire, and now everything's out of whack. So what we would say is that the goal of the church, the goal of the full gospel, is that the kingdom of God, we'd experience it here. That we would be fully human, fully as we were designed. So that's the work that you all do as you think about microbiology and cultivating and working with local people. We are trying to restore. But of course, we're living in the now and not yet, the in-between times, because Christ has not come again yet. And until he does, we as Christians are called to keep working. But because we live in this time of the now and the not yet, we have material poverty and all sorts of other poverty. And those are poverty is caused by 3 things: broken people, broken systems, demonic forces. If you really, we'll get to demonic forces. If you really want more about this, pick up the book Becoming Whole, or the Field Guide to Becoming Whole. That's the newest Brian Fickert LP. I wish he did make a record. That would be fascinating. So broken people, just that tire wheel broken, and so we're not working exactly as we should, and there's sin and brokenness inside of us. Broken systems that we can feel, the inequalities, corruption in governments or other places. So there's brokenness outside of us as well. And of course, we can talk about the brokenness in all the plastic in the oceans, or anywhere you want to go with it. And then demonic forces. When I'm in the West, I feel like I need to remind people this is a real thing that's happening all the time. But you do not seem like an audience that I need to remind of that, so we'll just move on. So poverty alleviation is about creating a community that applies the power of Christ's death and resurrection to the brokenness in ourselves and the world. That's what poverty alleviation is. So this is a picture taken during the Great Depression. And you see some men lined up there to get free soup for the unemployed. At Chalmers, we like to use some metaphors to help us understand the best approach to poverty alleviation. The first approach is this idea, the soup line, the soup kitchen. Imagine, I don't know what comes up in your mind, but in my mind, I imagine a row of tables with pots and plates of food. On one side is the helpers, or the people with stuff. On the other side of the table, the people who don't have anything have to be on that side. It goes in one direction, the soup ladle's out. Very transactional. There are times when that is the correct response. In a relief situation, yes, we are doing life-saving interventions. But if you're more in a development cycle or a rehabilitation cycle, that can be really damaging. So what do we like to think of instead? Well, for us, the opposite of a soup kitchen is a potluck or a covered dish supper. This is where the community each makes a dish they're best at, brings it to the table, and we all enjoy the meal together. That's where we want to get with poverty alleviation. So let me contrast these two images with some words. If you approach poverty from a need-based mindset, it's problem-oriented. You're just looking around at what don't you have? Let's put that in. Solutions tend to come from the outside inward to the community, and those that are receiving, those that are involved, the community members, are cast as victims, consumers. Not really those priest-ruler image of Christ. Yeah, the frog is back. Remember the frog. That helping hurts. Asset-based approach does something different. It's possibility-oriented. You build on what a community already has, which implies you have to ask them. Solutions usually move from inside the community outward, and the people in the community are cast as survivors, producers, providers. I think any of us would do better in that role. So that's asset-based. So we've talked a little bit about God's story. We've talked about asset-based approach. Now we're going to talk about that third ingredient that Brian Fickert wanted, design thinking. So design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation. What it says is that innovation, in this Venn diagram, the circle in the middle, the triangle in the middle is innovation, right? And you can get there from different places. But what design thinking asks you to do is hold off on viability and feasibility and go through desirability. Do the people you're working with, does the community want it, whatever it is? So you put off, can we do this? Should we do this? And go in, do people want this? Now, you'll notice there's already a problem for us as Christians. Design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation. Humans want all sorts of things that do not promote flourishing. So we talk about kingdom-centered innovation or Christ-centered innovation because we are always doing whatever we're doing before the face of God. So if you want to talk about, I'm not going to, if God is the main user you're trying to please. I know that sounds strange. So here's the deal, though. There was more than one problem with what Brian had asked me to do. Design thinking is quite complex. I have my own theories about consultants keeping it complex. But Brian was saying, I want the poorest people in the world to be able to use design thinking themselves. So you think about, we have a very mature adults all over the world with lots of life experience, but some places there's not a lot of formal education. And even wealthy Westerners hire expensive consultants to lead them through processes of this. So we had to do a lot of work back in 2019 to get to strip this back, to make it as easy as possible. And we ended up with a 3-step process. And we call this process Innovate. The 3 steps are discover, design, do. You'll see it's a circle because you never stop doing that. I'll talk more about this in my breakout tonight. But just so you have a sense of what it is, I'm going to tell you some stories in a minute, but we take people through a 9-week process. And when I say we, Chalmers certifies local people to be facilitators. Those local people go to their community and take them. So we're not involved, which is great. So in the first stage, the discovery stage, you're listening to what the community has, what they're good at. We talk about God's story. We use some stories to compare the way of Jesus to the way of the world. Community listening, asset mapping, you get it. In the second phase, we have another set of tools. We teach how to ask the right kinds of questions before you brainstorm. That is one of the hardest skills in innovation, is asking the right question. It takes a long time to master. Prototyping, that's one of my favorites. I love doing prototyping. And then third, in the do phase, we teach people how to test their ideas, how to plan, what team roles they need, and then how to get feedback and iterate on their designs. So that's what Innovate is. It's a creative process toward community flourishing. You can tell I have that one by heart. And we haven't seen anything else out in the marketplace or that quite combines these 3 disciplines. So you've got God's story, asset-based approach, and design thinking. The other thing that's unusual is there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of design thinking being done to the materially poor, to them, not with. And this was designed so that the community members are the ones coming up with the challenges, the questions, the assets to apply. It's them, it's not us. And then it's really fast. Our slowest one, the 9-week one, is what we use in a lot of places, including the majority world. So back to Togo. We had a prototype of this, and all the people in this picture that you're seeing, and again, see how tall Brian is? Back right there. These were Chalmers facilitators of savings groups. They already were Chalmerized. We just taught them this new process. And they went back, and we were like, is it going to work? They went back. So they're upper left. We're teaching them. They're becoming certified facilitators. On the right there, that's Florence teaching a huge group. You know, an ideal design team is 3 to 7 people, but we don't have control out there. And so we get 40 people groups, which is great. And you see here that on the bottom left, these are teams doing design thinking just under a tree and absolutely being able to do it, which there are still people to this day, shockingly, that push back and say, I don't know if they can do it, which I find very patronizing. But anyway, no one in here is like that. So they created a community project that then they implemented. This is just one picture of many I could show, but this community was repairing a road. Many communities repaired roads because roads, as you know, are the way to market, to healthcare, to school. And a fetish priest, who was also a chief, was walking on this road, and people kept asking this group, what are you doing? Because it's not usual. Who are you and what are you doing? Oh, we're Christians, we come from that church, and we're fixing the road to show the love of Christ to our community. This fetish priest offered that group land in his village to start a church. He said, I want this in my village. People have come to Christ just walking by these projects. Okay, I have a lot more to show you, so I'll keep going. Pandemic hit, we found the frog, we had to go to Zoom. Now, the beauty of what Zoom allowed us to do is for the first time, Chalmers was able to work in the Middle East with people. We've had teams. I have a whole participant packet translated into Arabic that someone just did for us. We've been in Europe, which is not normally a place we implement, all over the place. It's been great. This was a tiny church in Kenya that asked to be in our online class, and they created sustainable urban farming and started teaching youth and children. Here they're teaching children how to do just a kitchen garden. Wonderful projects. Also, US-based project. This is Oklahoma on the left, Memphis on the right. This on the right is a woman who is a former prostitute, and they have a drop-in center for women trapped in addiction and trafficking. And that ministry, I just talked to the head of their board, and they've grown and expanded through using this process of asking the women. In this case, the women did not want to hear the gospel from pastors or police. Those people were their customers. They didn't trust them. But they would hear it from women who had been through the same things that they had been through. And so they were getting this woman biblical training so she could lead Bible studies, and you get it, flourishing. Here's Illinois and Liberia. So the first time, 20 years prior to when this photo was taken in 2022, we had gathered the nations in at Covenant College on top of a mountain overlooking Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now we were going out and training local people to take this forward. So we worked with the Free Methodist Church in Latin America, and we trained all these Nicaraguans. And let me tell you, Nicaraguans can take a group photo. I normally have to be like getting everybody to stand. These people just like knew where to go, and it was great. So what did the Nicaraguans do with it? Well, we started getting pictures back. This group in the bottom left cleared a disused lot in their community and started holding prayer services there. What happens when people use Innovate in the field is their team tends to get bigger because people keep joining. That happens a lot of the time. They eventually planted a church there. I love the country ladies on the upper right. That's what I call them. These women I would not mess with. I was just like, are you okay? Okay, great. They were tough. But the sewing machine is just a really interesting story. So a community, they decided after doing an asset map and kind of a challenge tree that they wanted to go after addiction and homelessness, people sleeping on the streets in their community. So they went through the process. And at some point in the process, with the asset mapping, they realized they had sewing machines in their community that were not being used and people who knew how to teach others to sew. They started a sewing school, unbeknownst to them. A local textile company owner, heard about them and said, whoever graduates from your sewing school, I will hire in my company. I mean, that's not the power of this process. That is the power of the Holy Spirit. So now they have a sewing school to solve addiction and homelessness in their community. Next stop, Ukraine and Romania. We were there, actually my colleague Abigail is here somewhere. We trained all of these pastors, church leaders in 2 hours from the Ukrainian border in January of 2023. I'm actually going back there in a couple weeks, next month. So Hope International came to us. We weren't looking to try innovate in a conflict zone, but that's what God wanted to do. So there we are. They went back into their churches in Ukraine, and this magical thing happened. The churches simply turned outward, which is something that I know in my community in the United States I want the church to do. I feel the church turns in. I'm guilty of it myself. We need to turn out. Bottom left picture is a police academy, and they use the process to try to get ahead of post-war domestic abuse. Isn't that great? That the police not only were open to stuff that had the Bible in it, because that's just, I'm from California, that's just a weird concept to me that wouldn't be shut down. But they were using it for this beautiful reason of trying to prepare families and trying to prepare returning soldiers to come back home. So yeah, I guess it worked in conflict. Last year, we went back to Ghana and Togo just about this time last year with the new improved version of Innovate. And we trained there were 3 people that I had trained back in 2019, and they were here and got the new version as we have built it with our users and improved it. They have done amazing projects. The only place where Chalmers implements is in Togo and Ghana in West Africa. We don't implement, we equip y'all. You can tell I've lived in the South for a long time. I'm fluent in y'all. They did amazing projects. They improved agricultural outcomes. They did community infrastructure projects, floodwater accumulation, trying to solve that. Reduction of poverty. Again, there are no Westerners involved. We're not there. And really, the facilitator is a midwife. That's how I see my role. I'm just there to get the thing that's in you out of you safely. And that's it. I didn't have any hand in, anyway, you get it. But we were delighted with both the range of products, or the range of projects that were implemented. People stopped going to fetish priests to solve their problems. There was one village where men who had been, they had beef for decades, reconciled. Just some beautiful, beautiful outworking of the Holy Spirit. Last month, we were in Ecuador, and we trained a new batch of facilitators. That's their certificates that they're proudly holding. And we are already getting stories back from them of the work they're doing. They're not to the project implementation. They hopefully will be by Christmas. But they're doing these amazing meetings in total power outages. How many people are aware of Latin America or from Latin America? And a lot of their power is hydroelectric, and they've had extended drought. So there are mass power. While we were there, we had wildfire in Quito. We had power outages every day, and then the hotel flooded. The floor above me, I was just quietly working, and I heard this dripping. I'm like, that's not an exterior wall. It was the floor above us. So that was a great trip. But on that trip, we did some field site visits. And when I walked into this place in Quito, I was struck by 2 competing truths. I knew I had never been in this place before, but I completely remembered it. And that doesn't make any sense. So I just kind of went through what they were telling me about it. I found this whiteboard. That kind of was a little tip-off. And I remembered this picture that had been sent to me from 2021. This is my friend JR. He is a missionary, but he's been in Haiti, Peru, Ecuador his entire adult life. And he's there on the board. I teach in English online when we do Innovate Online. He's translating it all into Spanish and taking this small house church through. So he wasn't able to be with us because of a family emergency, but it was just like amazing to be somewhere that we had touched through Zoom. I got a lot of relief, delight, and hope from that. So these are the people, these are Pastor Jose and Graciela. And they run a children's program, and they run the house church here. This land was purchased by the church. It's just shy of an acre. This is the highest part of the ground that we climbed up to, that's Pastor Jaime. He's holding radishes. All of the land looked like this. It used to be a brick factory, a burn pit. There was glass, plastic, all sorts of things in the ground. The ground only grew weeds. There was nothing good in the soil. But now this is what the lower part that they've rehabilitated looks like. So what they did is they found out that they had some resources through the Ecuadorian government that they could get insight from consultants. And Pastor Jose tells me that at first the women started working, and it made the men feel so ashamed that they finally started working, because all they had were hand tools and had to literally wheelbarrow out the waste and have it carted away because of all the rules. But they grow enough food now to feed the children in their day program. They teach the parents of the children about nutrition and advise them on how they can be growing in their land. They also have to constantly fight erosion. I loved, maybe it's in the back picture. Yeah, I have a better picture of it. So you see those tires, because it's built on the side of a cliff, basically, they have to terrace in a way they can. They do small animal husbandry. Guinea pigs is a big food animal in Ecuador, and rabbits. And they use the waste from those animals to go right back into the garden. I was able to eat a salad 80% made from the garden while I was there, even though it was the very end of the growing season. And that just blew my mind, to go from ground that didn't have any soil to me eating a salad. I experienced relief, delight, and hope. And this was a change of behavior that lasted over time, which is beautiful. So I'm going to end with my question of this talk. Can innovation end poverty? I don't know if I care about that answer. I don't know if I can tell you the answer. What I care more about is what these young people think the answer is in Togo. And I care about what these people in Latin America think. That's what I care about in answering this question, is what can these folks do? So I would love for you today or now to ask God what you want, what He wants you to take from this talk back with you. I think we go now into a time of Q&A, but if no one has any questions, and you're welcome to ask, just kind of ask your neighbor, what's something important you're taking out of this, if you need a question to prompt conversation. But thank you so much.